Good afternoon. The Public Safety Committee will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Alderwoman Keys.
Here.
Alderwoman Velasquez.
Present.
Alderwoman Sanye.
Present.
Alderman Aldrich.
Present.
Chair Narayan.
Here.
Alderman Oldenburg. We have 6 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Quorum being present, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Thursday, March 22nd, 2024.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Alderwoman Saunier, seconded by Alderman Aldridge that we approve the minutes. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. Alderman Aldrich.
Aye.
Chair Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg. We have 6 aye votes.
All right, with that, we have approved the minutes. The way that we're going to take things up today, we have Board Bill number 231, and then we're going to have discussion on re-envisioning the workhouse. I see that there are many, many people present today. We do have a hard stop at 3:30. There's another meeting scheduled here. To the extent that people want to have public comment, we will keep public comment going next week. When we had initially scheduled this meeting, there was not a 3:30 meeting scheduled afterwards, but I want to make sure that everyone knows that we are interested in hearing from you. I don't want to just conclude the meeting and not take any testimony from the public. So we're going to move through the administration's presentation, and then we'll take public comment during the time that we can up until we need to yield for the next hearing, and then we'll come back next week and we'll take any remaining public comment. With that, I will turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Aldridge while I take up Board Bill 231.
All right, Alderman Narayan, you may proceed on Board Bill 231.
Thank you, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Board Bill number 231 is a fairly straightforward board bill. Some years back, we adopted the 2018 International Fire Code. We adopted major portions of that. One part that we did not adopt is the inspections of fire and smoke dampers. Fire and smoke dampers, for any who aren't aware, are tools that give, they create negative and positive pressure in rooms and in emergency evacuation routes that can clear smoke from areas and prevent fire from spreading to areas. They can give members of the general public more time to get out of buildings that are on fire, becoming smoke-filled, and they can give our first responders more time to get in and out of those buildings in instances where every second counts. I do have a brief presentation on it that I would like to get up on the screen. Just a second. Sure. Sorry about that.
to share screen.
Let's see. It says that you disabled from screen. That need to. Joy of tech issues.
Yeah. This computer's been back all day.
We're going to go get a laptop to try to have him to log into ours because it's not in the drive for him to get up on the screen. It's not in our drive. We don't have the presentation. So is there any way he can send the presentation to the clerk or to Tracy Billups so we can?
Or just the PowerPoint to
Drive.
does it have it on it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Let me just get rid of this and I'll hand you this. Yeah, I can just start.
Okay.
Just get it out of the way.
Yeah, we're just going to forego the PowerPoint presentation because of the tech issue, and I will turn the meeting over.
Hi, I'm Jason LaChance. I'm a instructor at Smart Local.
Excuse me, Mr. Jason, we'll need to swear you
sworn.
in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you raise your right hand? Clerk, could you swear in Mr. Jason?
Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. You may proceed.
All right, you may proceed.
I'm Jason LaChance. I'm a instructor at Local 36 Training School, the sheet metal workers. I'm down here today because I've experienced a lot of things going wrong with these smoke dampers and fire dampers. Just not that long ago, we saw in Webster Groves, 18 people were saved out of a stairwell because of it. They were managed to get to the stairwell and then they were saved. What we're looking at is the IFC 2018. It includes in there to have these inspected every 4 years and every 6 years where there's a hospital. And it also calls for someone qualified to inspect it. The qualification has no definition. So who's going to be able to qualify anybody? Can I open up my garage and just anybody that walks in, I'm handing out a certification to? And where that falls in is ANSI, which is the American National Standards Institute, has what they call ISO 17024. And in that, what they do is they accredit certification organizations. So they basically make sure that the people that are qualified by people that are qualified to qualify them. If this isn't done, these aren't getting inspected right. What these are doing in fire dampers, we're maintaining a fire barrier. That means that damper is going to close and it's not going to let air go through there to feed a fire. In a smoke barrier for smoke dampers, what it's going to do, it's going to close and keep the smoke and toxic gas from getting into that area. We also have what they call stairwell pressurization and egress pressurization with smoke control. With that pressurization, what it does is it pressurizes these areas to allow people to get in and out of the building. So get the people out, get the first responders in the event of a fire. So there's a lot of folks that are being protected by that. And that's what I got. You guys got any questions?
Are there any questions?
All right, I'll go in a line of seniority from members of the committee. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
No questions at this time. I'm reading up on it. Thank you.
Alderwoman Keys,
Yes, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Vice Chair.
Vice Chair. I'd like to know what specific types of buildings would be affected by these dampers. Are these hospitals, schools, apartment complexes, maybe?
Absolutely. Everything that you just said there.
Okay.
Everything that you just said there. Fire dampers and smoke dampers exist in buildings all over the place. The oldest ones I've seen were from the 1940s.
Okay.
So they've been putting in forever. I worked as a foreman installing these. I've worked as a technician inspecting these. They are all over the place. I'm a city resident. My kids are in Woodward School, Bush School, Central VPA, and I know that there's fire and smoke dampers in there. I don't know if they've been inspected. I don't know if they're working right.
So these would be inspected, what, every 4 years, did you say?
Yeah, it's every 4 years. What they say is after a building's built, they have what's called an acceptance test. So that acceptance testing is kind of the commissioning. And then so what the NFPAs say, NFPA 80, NFPA 105, NFPA 92, what they say is they need to be inspected 1 year after that acceptance. And then 4 years after that, continuing, except for places that have a hospital in it, and that's every 6 years. And that's determined by the Joint Commission. Hospitals have a lot more testing in between testing to make sure that everything's working right.
So would these entities be charged with the responsibility of reaching out to you to say, hey, it's been 4 years, you reach out to them? Do they pay a fee? Like, a lot of apartment buildings, you move in, you got to have an inspection, an individual inspection for that apartment or even a business. I recall having to have inspections for my business locations years ago.
They fall into the inspection category like the sprinkler systems do and the fire alarms do. And you will have to have somebody inspect them. They will have to be inspected. Mm-hmm. The idea is right now we've ran into over and over and over again people that aren't qualified to inspect this doing it. I've had just recently, or not recently, in 2013, I did a hospital in the St. Louis area, 6-story hospital that was built in 1972. We went and did a stairwell pressurization test. When we fired up the system, construction debris fell out of the dampers. We looked through the window, saw that the construction debris had fell out. Me and another man my size could not open that door because it pressurized that stairwell so much that they couldn't open the door. What had happened is it had never been inspected, and the poly for the pneumatics fell off the dampers down on the bottom, so they weren't being able to relieve. As we're doing this, we were looking at all the patients in the floors. It made us green, almost sick. There were 6 stairwells and no other way out of that building, and not one person would be able to get into one of the stairwells. And the elevator had been recalled to a different floor. So that with what that is and how it is, the IFC 2018 calls for that 108, 105, 80, and 92, and those inspections are every 4 years. What we're saying is just somebody needs to be qualified. That qualified needs to have a definition.
All right. Thank you so much. Those are very, very important things that need to be done for the safety of all persons in those types of buildings and situations. So I certainly appreciate your attention and being here today.
Thank you.
All right, I did see Alderman Oberg on. Did you have any questions, Alderman? No questions. See you shaking your head. Alderwoman Velasquez.
No questions. Thank
Alderwoman
you.
Tanya. No questions. No questions for myself. Is there any people in favor or support?
I'm not quite done.
Oh, go ahead.
Vice Chair, I have a question too before we close out after the speakers.
Sure. When this was brought to my attention, I didn't realize that virtually all of these larger buildings have these smoke dampers. And what's happening right now is in the same check where they're looking for the sprinklers and fire alarms and things like that, they're looking to see if these are physically present. but they're not looking to see if they actually work. And if they don't work, not only does it not help the situation, as we just heard, it can actively make it worse. Also, there's a lot of people who just don't know what these are. And so some of the things that we've seen is people propping them open to get either air conditioning or heat into rooms. People run extension cords through them. People do all kinds of things that if they knew that this was about fire safety, they wouldn't. But they just don't know what it is. It looks almost like a vent. And so someone coming on site and making sure, not just shining a flashlight on it and saying, hey, there it is, but making sure it actually functions can really ultimately save lives, both of the general public as well as our first responders. I also have Demetrius Alford here who wants to just say a couple words in favor of this.
All right, Mr. Alfred, if clerk, could you swear him in? Could you raise your right hand?
Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Alfred, state your first and last name. You can proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Demetrius Alfred. I'm the Missouri State Council of Firefighters President, member of Local 73, past president, and current member of St. Louis Fire Department. I've talked to the aldermen and the sheet metal workers about this legislation. We've talked to the fire marshal's office and some of our inspectors, and we all are in agreement that we think this legislation will support what we do on our jobs and save lives. And we think having somebody there that's certified to inspect the equipment is very important, that it's working. I've been in a building where they had these dampers that didn't function properly. It gets quite dangerous when you're looking for a hallway that's supposed to be smoke-free and it isn't, and you're wondering if there's another fire or has the fire extended. So we support this legislation as written. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alfred. Going in order of seniority, any questions? Alderman Oldenburg?
No questions. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard?
Hi, yes, and hey, Demetrius. I'm just trying to check and see just for clarity, because I know who Demetrius Alford represents, but what will this mean for the inspectors that are on now with the St. Louis Fire Department?
We're not completely sure if they would have to go through the training to be certified or if they're going to be separate inspectors that will be certified. So I think right now what they do is go through and make sure that the dampers are there. I don't know if they're certified for that, but that, they'll check it and see if it's there, and they'll check it off the list just like they would do smoke detectors and things like that. With a smoke detector, it's a little bit easier to check. So I'm not sure what the plan is. You could bring them up to certification, or if we'll be bringing in another inspector that's certified, that'll just be for that particular piece.
Okay, and will these inspectors be under the fire department or under the building division, or do you have any idea where direction you want to go with that, Alderman Narayan?
Really, what this legislation lays out is that they need to be certified through ANSI, which is one of the largest accrediting agencies in virtually almost every accreditation that you get is what's called ANSI certified. As was pointed out earlier, they are basically the entity that certifies who is able to certify people. And so all the legislation really clearly lays out is that the person who does the inspection on the damper needs to put the date of the inspection, their name, and then when their certification expires, pretty prominently on there's a pretty large sticker on these smoke dampers that you can just slap on there. And so the idea is that if there is any issue with them, you can immediately identify the last time it was inspected, who inspected it, and that they were current on their inspections. So as far as the individual worker who does it, it may vary by who is actually doing the various inspections for any given building.
All right. Alderwoman,
We went virtual to real life.
Alderwoman Keys?
No, No questions. Thank you
Alderwoman
guys for
Velasquez.
being here.
Oh, Alderwoman Velasquez.
One quick question for the bill sponsor. Is there a fiscal note attached to this and/or what is, you all
So
figured out whatever associated costs
This
there
is going
are?
to have a negligible fiscal impact on the city. The only impact that it would have is to the extent that our buildings have fire dampers, they would need to also be inspected. So that's really the only impact.
Okay, great. No other questions.
Alderwoman Sanye. No questions for myself. Is that all your speakers, Alderman?
Thank you for the opportunity, guys.
Thank you. I wanted to add too, these things cannot be inspected by just looking at them from the floor. They have to be, you have to be able to stick your head inside the duct. You have to be able to touch them to inspect them. So if you can't just look up in the air and say, hey, that's inspected. There's a lot of things that can happen on the outside of that that'll make it look like it's working, and it's not. So those inspections have to be visual. You have to get your hand on it, and also they're cleaned at that point in time and maintenance with a dry lubricant to make sure that it's going to work in case they need it to work. So you have to get in there and you have to be able to touch it, and the person that's getting in there and being able to see that has to be somebody that knows what they're looking at.
Gotcha.
Thanks for letting me talk, guys.
All right. Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers in favor or against?
We have a Mr. Jason LaChance in support.
That was me.
Okay, that's it.
All right. Thank you. Seeing there's no other questions from the committee, Chairman, you have the floor to close.
Thank you. I ask for your favorable consideration in getting the board bill out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
I'd like to make a motion that we pass Board Bill 231 with the due pass. There was a second. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Alderman Oldenburg,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Keys,
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderman Aldred,
Aye.
Chair Narayan.
Aye.
We have 7 aye votes.
By your vote, sustain the motion.
By your vote, you've sustained the motion. We have passed board bill number 231 out with a due pass recommendation. At this point, we will take up item number 1 for committee discussion, re-envisioning the workhouse. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm going to get us started today. My name is Inez Bordeaux.
You will have to be sworn in.
Oh,
Ms.
I
Bordeaux,
always tell the truth when I'm here.
Ms. Bordeaux, do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Absolutely.
All right, please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Inez Bordeaux. I'm the Deputy Director of Community Collaborations at Arch City Defenders. I'm a directly impacted person. I spent time in the workhouse in 2016. I am one of the community design organizers on the re-envisioning the workhouse process. I'm also a member of the steering committee, and I wanted to start us off by thanking you for having this hearing. We are really looking forward to the opportunity to highlighting the important work that we did to re-envision the workhouse. As you can see, most of the people in this room are here to speak in support of following the recommendations put forward by the Re-envisioning the Workhouse report. And with that, I want to turn it over to some of the experts that are going to be speaking today. These folks were part of the consultant team. We have Sophia Whitney and Melissa Sanders. I will leave them to do their own intros because they can do it way better than I can. So with that, I turn it over to them.
All All right. If are any of the speakers virtual? Two of them. Okay. If all three of you could just swear in, if you could raise your right hand, and do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
I do.
I do.
All right. Please proceed.
Hey, I would love to share my screen. It doesn't look like I have that ability right now. That's possible.
You can share your screen.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Just need my notes. Okay. Well, I'm Sophia Ostrans, and we're really excited to be here to share this past year's effort. In 2023, the city of St. Louis actually invested time and funding into an engagement process to learn from community about desired and appropriate post-incarceration uses for the former workhouse jail and the land surrounding it. So we want to share with you today a vision derived from extensive engagement, work with local experts, and deep conversations led by community stakeholders with the strongest connections to the site. This document is not a final determination. The City of St. Louis is currently using this feedback to inform future decisions moving forward. Whitney, Melissa, and myself are here today representing the consultant team that facilitated this process. We bring experience in public design, facilitation, architecture, and planning with a focus on creating just outcomes. Collocate led this process, bringing our experience of jail re-envisioning from other cities in the U.S. As we asked about uses for the site, many wanted to know how it could provide the highest community benefit. Mayor Tashara Jones had called for the closure of the workhouse starting in 2016, noting its inhumane conditions and toxic culture of abuse, retaliation, and neglect. She stated that the conditions were compounded by the fact that most detainees had not been convicted of a crime while staying for longer than 300 days. We know that this can lead to people losing housing, jobs, and disrupt their ability to care for themselves or families. To address the site's history, a lot of people wanted to support people affected by this incarceration. This included those formerly incarcerated, as well as many in the general public who actually asked for the ideas of those incarcerated to be prioritized before their own. The engagement produced a vision for a safer city where the closure of the jail is complemented by a resource hub off-site that provides services that stabilize communities. This approach aims to reduce crime and the necessity for incarceration. Given the isolation of the workhouse and its emotionally toxic history, this approach expands our imagination to consider how the workhouse might be leveraged to create needed resources in neighborhoods where people currently are. The workhouse site itself became less of a focus for services and instead seeks to create benefit through options like creating reliable and affordable power for nearby residents, bringing in industry to maximize job creation and generate profit towards offsite community benefit, investing only in a small memorial in order to focus funds towards the memorial as a resource hub offsite, and the option for an animal shelter, which does offer some services. So we'll be talking more about how all of these options were reached. We'll go through and describe the community engagement, what we heard and learned and considered, and then go a bit more in depth on the vision.
Right.
So I'll pass it to Melissa to talk about engagement.
Yeah, I'm Melissa Bed Sanders. I am a local architect here in St. Louis, and I was also responsible for helping with the engagement regarding this proposal. Before we get to the recommendations outlined in the report, I want to highlight that the community engagement efforts that helped to shape the report, they helped to guide steering committee conversations, and then also were introduced to help those perspectives of those directly impacted by the workhouse and those in the broader St. Louis region. Go to the next slide. Community engagement took place over 2 rounds, each being a little over 2 months in length. Through those rounds, we had just under 2,500 responses to the survey questions outlined in the report, with just under half of that number, about 43%, representing those who we call directly impacted individuals. Directly impacted individuals were people who were formerly incarcerated, friends and family of those formerly incarcerated, advocates or workers in the of those who have been incarcerated, or workers, former employees of the workhouse. The 2,500 number represents the formal responses that we had, but it is not the entirety of how many people we reached out, whether that was through physical or virtual engagement. We were asked by the city to identify priority stakeholders in this process and to prioritize the view of those who had been directly impacted by the workhouse. Our intent was to gain an understanding of the perspective of those who had been incarcerated by the workhouse, as well as the impact on their families, communities, and loved ones. It was necessary for us to understand their experiences, how their experiences shaped their ideas around a post-carceral use of the space. We heard stories from those who had lost loved ones in the workhouse and the impact it had on their lives. We spoke with those whose personal stories of incarceration had a profound impact on their lives and the lives of their communities. We heard from those working and advocating in spaces for those who had been unjustly incarcerated and those recovering from the effects of incarceration. We also spoke with those in surrounding communities who were affected by the systems of poverty and incarceration. In addition to the priority stakeholders and directly impacted individuals, we also thought about the broader context in which we're working. And so we used historical data about the individuals who were incarcerated in the workhouse to understand the population was primarily Black and primarily below the poverty line. And then we mapped that on top of the current makeup of the city, and this is what gave us our priority zip codes that we focused on. They were areas in which there was 40% or more Black population or underneath the poverty line. And also because the workhouse is not embedded in a residential community, we identified Baden as the closest residential community for on-the-ground efforts. Next slide. The diagram on the right is a visual of the rounds of engagement and the process that we took when we were informing the stakeholder steering committee. Getting into the methods that people were reached, all methods were open to the public, with targeted engagement taking the form of more granular engagement, such as community meetings and other in-person conversations within priority neighborhoods and priority zip codes. The engagement was also co-facilitated by our community design organizers. You heard from one with Inez, members of our team who belonged to directly impacted communities. They were integral in helping us to solicit responses from priority stakeholders, having already had existing relationships and knowledge of organizations, locations, and communities that we were wanting to prioritize. The round one engagement was broad. We focused more on communicating the process of the report, the city and the mayor's previous work regarding the closure of the workhouse. We focused our attention on directing the public to the website and survey questions. We asked all of St. Louis, both impacted and non-impacted, to dream big when thinking about a post-carceral use of the space. One of the primary themes asked was, what would St. Louis look like if people and communities impacted by the workhouse were supported to live their best lives? This was one of the questions in round one, amongst others. Round two engagement became more of a narrow focus where we synthesized the responses heard in round one and asked people to explain more about their responses and reactions to what we heard in round one. When looking at the responses in round one, we also understood that we were not reaching as many directly impacted folks as we needed to, and through just digital and surveying with paper alone. So we reassessed and began a more targeted engagement, such as attending public events, National Night Out, ward and neighborhood meetings, and regional community events. We use paper surveys and door-to-door canvassing to help us increase the number of responses from directly impacted individuals and priority neighborhoods and priority zip codes. Due to our time limitations, we also focused on the ground efforts in North St. Louis and in Baden. Additionally, we spoke with leaders from organizations that represent incarcerated populations and communities, as well as city officials. And I will pass it back to Sophia to talk about what we heard.
Thank you. So what we heard and considered to create a recommendation, in our early engagement, we broadly asked what people would propose on and around the site. So the images here are uses that were brought up repeatedly, and the sizes reflect how many times ideas were noted. There was strong support for opportunities to remember injustice with a memorial or museum. You can also see that our priority stakeholders were highly interested in finding and maintaining jobs to enable stability. And the focus on youth education and recreation were related, as people, particularly in North St. Louis, were interested in seeing more options for family to have healthy places to go, instead of resorting to the streets, to be able to better set up themselves for a stable future. Finally, transitional housing was noted as a strong need to reduce homelessness and get people off their feet. However, when we also factor in which uses people strongly opposed having on the site, which is another question we asked, we actually end up with a different picture. In particular, there was a very strong opposition to having housing on the site, with more people opposing housing than were for it. Other community uses were also opposed for similar reasons. The strongest opposition actually was to use by large corporations. There's quite a fear that the site would just go to creating profit without community benefit. Notably, industry was lumped into this concern. However, when industry is aligned with accessible jobs and benefit, it was an idea that is well supported. Oppositions to social uses on the site generally came because of the site conditions, so I did want to take a look at that together. The site's an industrial area. It is surrounded by trucking, garbage, and tow lots, and we did anticipate soil toxicity and recommended an assessment as part of our recommendation. Many who are more familiar with the site talk about it being disconnected, undesirable, or inappropriate for uses other than industrial. You can see with the magenta that the edge of the Baden neighborhood and a bus line are just outside of a 5-minute walking radius, which is the furthest most are willing to walk in a pedestrian-friendly environment. However, Hall Street is unfriendly. It's got high-speed traffic, industry, and no accommodations for pedestrians, which we saw was leading to a higher sense of isolation than is reflected on the map. When we zoom out, we also see that the site is at the very edge of the city with limited connection to neighborhoods. And we know that services that most strongly support community stability are most effective when embedded in neighborhoods where people are. Finally, in addition to physical constraints, we were also hearing a lot that the site holds emotional trauma, which can make it difficult to imagine future use by people. Some noting that they can't see themselves returning to a site where they were once locked up, and others who see this place as a place where people were thrown away and did not want to see others pushed to a site that seemed to disappear undesired people. I want to note there's always a range of perspectives. We did also hear from many who imagined the site transformed for services, but those most familiar with the site who we were prioritizing, including those who were in the building and neighbors from nearby zip codes, were the most likely to perceive the site as undesirable for services. We considered the needs expressed by the larger St. Louis community as well. So you can see the results of that here. The most notable differences included a less of a focus on youth, as well as a overwhelming support for animal shelter. And seeing the strength of the support for the shelter led to this becoming a topic of extensive discussion, which Whitney will describe later. Round 2 of engagement is where we were able to take the ideas forward and ask stakeholders to prioritize which felt most important. The steering committee recognized the need for many of the resources raised in round 1 and were committed to understanding how to meet those needs effectively. Understanding the undesirable conditions of the site and knowing that the services are most effective when in neighborhoods, this is where the proposal for resources offsite emerged. As residents prioritized uses for an offsite hub, most set their priorities by trying to meet basic needs, and many noted the importance of having services holistically together. This affirmed an approach of creating a hub instead of choosing or eliminating particular uses. Similarly, for uses on-site, community members shared priorities. The steering committee identified a range of options to leave as possibilities. The only options removed were to leave the site empty, as almost everyone rejected this idea as a waste that could leave the area worse off. Motorsports, because we found that this use would not be successful at the site size and location, and land back, because exploratory conversations with a tribal liaison suggested that the built-up nature of the site made it less desirable, and they also shared a desire to prioritize having the site be able to meet other community needs. So with that summary of what we heard, I'd like to pass it to Whitney to kind of share about the deliberations.
Thank you, Sophia. Good afternoon, members of the committee and members of the public. My name is Whitney Benz, and I was a facilitator for the Stakeholder Steering Committee for the project. And as Sophia said, I'm going to speak a little bit about the committee discussions and process. As was shared, the Stakeholder Steering Committee was driven by directly impacted people and folks local to the site who wanted to shape a vision for the site that served community needs. The committee considered every option voiced by community alongside feasibility data. They engaged in extensive deliberation for and against on each choice in multiple rounds. Now, I want to say a little bit about how feasibility information was considered and why that's important in this process. Sometimes in community visioning processes, they only ask people to dream big without grounding in realities, opportunities, and constraints. And we wanted this process to really reflect both dreaming big and also understanding and grounding in data that would shape how we should think about the opportunities and constraints of the site. So along with our steering committee members, individual and important experiences and insights, and the community engagement data, the steering committee proactively sought out and deeply considered feasibility data collected from subject matter experts on a variety of questions. All of this was because the steering committee and the consultant team wanted this process to be able to propose a vision that could be successfully implemented. Now, I want to give an example of how the steering committee engaged with community responses and feasibility data that led to the ultimate recommendations that they came to, specifically around the animal shelter. So, as was shared in the engagement data breakdown by my colleagues, in reviewing the broader responses, so not reflective of the directly impacted groups surveyed, there was a lot of support for the site to be used and converted to an animal shelter. In particular, there was a proposal by CARE STL, the operator of the city animal shelter at the current site, that also included a provision of housing for unhoused people seeking shelter with their pets to be co-located with the animal shelter. So for the steering committee holding this stark difference in perspectives between what we were hearing in general public perspectives and the different priorities for more directly impacted respondents, including their own, was very challenging. The idea of having a site where people were caged, transformed into a dog shelter, felt itself uncomfortable and unsettling and just wrong for some steering committee members. And more controversial was the inclusion in the animal shelter proposal of the option for housing for unhoused people with their pets, given the ongoing concerns about remoteness, pollution, contamination, being outside of neighborhood community, and a history of hiding people away on the site. All felt like important reasons to not support this option. And the steering committee asked for more feasibility data from subject matter experts. And in that process, they learned more about how the site could be well suited after renovations for an animal shelter use. They also learned of an ongoing city unmet need of transitional housing for people who want to stay with their pets. Currently, no shelter in the city can accommodate this need. The committee was committed to providing options, not just favorites, as long as they were consistent with community support, feasibility information, and interests of directly impacted people with connection to the site. So they met again multiple times around this particular issue to consider how this could work, if at all, and under what constraints. And what they came to was a list of recommended options that included the recommendation of an animal shelter with a limited amount of housing for unhoused people with pets, with a number of limiting conditions, which are reflected in the report. This was not easily recommended, but something that community expressed need and support for. And if it was limited enough and resourced enough, the committee could support it. However, the steering committee was clear in their assessment that the site was not well suited for housing or shelter generally, and only in this narrow instance where unhoused folks and their pets might have access to special resources, might the pros outweigh the cons. It is important to underline that the committee was very interested in addressing the needs of directly impacted people, including unhoused people, and incorporated that as a part of their vision for what might be built off-site in connection with the re-envisioning the workhouse broader project. Sophia is going to say more about that in a moment. But just one last thing for me. All of this is an example, just one example, of the rigorous and thoughtful way that the steering committee took in data, considered it, and came to the recommendations that you see in the report. I would like to highlight that the steering committee did a line-by-line walkthrough of the entire report. That means that the language in the report reflects with specificity the steering committee's intentions. And so when it is read and extrapolated from, that specificity ought be heeded in the reading. So I want to hand over to Sophia.
Great. So I just wanted to go into a bit more detail on the vision, come back to it. So the resource hub that I mentioned earlier is a place that's envisioned to bring providers together in one location to support access to services that support community stability. This includes support attaining jobs and housing, recovering from mental health challenges and drug addiction, accessing legal support, and other resources. Transitional housing is recommended here, off-site, near jobs and resources as a part of the hub. A more central location is suggested for accessibility for more residents, which you can see from the circle in the middle of the map. But finally, for the site itself, the process of demolition is an opportunity for closure, healing, and transition. And a memory marker can remember the histories and people affected by this site. Those who do not have the same connection to the site often noted that this was not a place they would go visit, but for those impacted by the site, a memory marker has been noted as a basic essential. We already previously went over other on-site uses for transforming the site itself, so animal shelter, solar, prairie, and industrial. So I'm just going to end back on this image with the overall vision. This release of the vision is an important transition point. We know that this vision is not a decision, yet we also heard that many are tired of saying what they need and envision, only to end up in a report that feels followed as convenient. And also, as an architectural professional, I want to note that as any pathway is explored, I know that there are real and complex constraints that create new decision points, and that those complexities are often what create differences in actions from recommendations. So as decisions are made, our hope and the hope we heard from community members is that the process we started can continue with ongoing opportunities for dialogue with stakeholders to allow community to work with the city to explore constraints, clarify and advocate for community intentions, and work together towards the best solutions possible. Our team really believes that this project is an opportunity to take one step closer to a just and thriving future city that we all want to see. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you for letting us speak today.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know that there are some folks from the administration who want to speak as well, but I want to make sure that anyone from the committee who has questions regarding the presentation has a chance to ask those while we still have everyone here. Alderman Oldenburg, any questions?
Just a couple. Thank you, Chairman, and I certainly want to thank the presenters and the committee for their work on this. I just want to clear up a few things in my mind as all regarding the surveys and the community input around said surveys. Is it correct that in round one, did I hear somebody say there was an option provided specifically for housing, transitional housing, or shelters? And then in round two, that option was not part of the survey. Is that correct?
Yeah, so round one, there were no constraints on ideas. We didn't start with a set of ideas, so it was broadly asking folks just what could you imagine here.
Okay.
The transition to round two, the steering committee did go ahead and review feasibility information and try to understand what appropriate uses would be and how to take what they had heard about needs and understand how those needs might be best met through this project. So in round two, housing was a part of what was asked about for priorities, but it was asked about in terms of the offsite uses, with the site being determined as not a great place to be having people.
Okay, so there was some ideas and input that came back that folks might want to see that as an option from a policy perspective, as well as maybe a virtue perspective of housing and shelter. But then the committee sort of discounted it in the round two survey as not really a viable option based on some feasibility metrics.
Based on feasibility, I would say based on feasibility as well as what we were hearing back from people. So if you want to look back at the slides in your own time, there's two that show what we were hearing back. The first, which shows like, yes, people did propose housing, but then if we also look at how the opposition to the idea of housing on site, we actually saw that more people, particularly those familiar with the site and those who are prioritizing, were saying, please, absolutely not housing on the site. So did want to just keep in mind, like, with anything, you're going to get perspectives in many directions, but kind of just understanding overall what we were hearing back.
We also heard from people who were located in Baden, and those who were located in the community of Baden also were very much opposed to having housing there for the reasons that we also shared with the steering committee, which were the remoteness, potential toxicity, and then also they felt that there were other places better suited within the city context.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We will move to Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm not going to hold up any questions because I'm excited to hear from the public as well. But I just want to say it's good to see you, Melissa. You know, I fell in love with you and work when we worked on the West End Plan, and I always love any intentional work that goes into hearing and connecting with the public. So thank you for the work, the presentation. I received a few texts asking where they can find the presentation outside of here, and I'll selfishly say I love the purple map.
Thank you. Yes, the presentation is on the city's website, and it's also, the entire report is on the city's website, and then also at aftertheworkhouse.com. That's currently on that website as well.
Alderwoman Keys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank all of you so much for all of the work, and especially the visuals provide a lot of great information and insight for everyone watching. So I appreciate you all being here today. Thank you.
Alderwoman Velasquez.
I have no questions. I just want to thank the presenters and thank the members of the public for being here.
Alderwoman Saunier.
Thank you, Sir Chair. I did just wonder, I know like we're talking a little bit about feasibility concerns, but I just have a little like questions about specifics. Was it air quality? Was it like just a little bit more if anything came up as far as what the specific concerns were with that?
So from our initial research, and I'll have Sophia also join in on this question, we primarily focused on the fact that it is not well resourced in terms of being connected to residential fabric, being connected by bus lines, also being in a food desert, those sorts of things. But we also recommended that there be a toxicity report just from the things that we viewed on site, and also understanding that it is in a site that is industrial. So there's industrial uses surrounding the site. The building is also older and has potential toxicity like lead and asbestos, things that can be remediated, but we wanted that to be a part of the testing that happened after.
Okay, but so you're saying that it would need more testing to identify maybe what some of the specific terms as far as sustainability of the site would be. Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Aldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll save my questions later. I know we're time constrained, but thank you guys for being here. Thanks for the report. I appreciate Alderwoman Saunier question and you really highlighting the concerns, especially when you talk about housing in that area, knowing that that is a industrial area. Trucks drive up and down that street that goes out in the air. There's still questions of the soil that may need to be remediated and just a lot of chemical activities and not in a residential area, which I think it also isn't even zoned residential, but we will get to that later, but thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I just have a couple of questions. First, thank you all for presenting. It's clear that a lot of time and energy went the presentation. If there was any increased public transit to the area, do you feel like it would be more appropriate to have housing, or are there so many issues there that even increased public transit wouldn't alleviate them? Because I mean, buses, you can put a bus stop somewhere, certainly.
You can definitely put a bus stop there. We are more concerned that there are multiple sort of detractors from that site that makes it inappropriate for the things that we talked about in terms of being in an industrial zone, the lack of bus access is also part of it, but then also it being in a food desert where there's no accessible food, fresh food nearby. There's also Hall Street has a large number of traffic incidents because it is a very fast and high traffic street, but also a trucking street where there are pollutants that are being polluted into the air every day on a daily basis. And those are things that, we couldn't cap that in any sort of way.
Sure. And then was there any discussion on, not for any sort of permanent shelter, but every year we seem to struggle in this city with the idea that it gets cold. Was there any discussion that even though this may not be an appropriate building to house people while they get back up on their feet for any length of time, anything like that, but when it's deadly cold outside, I mean, I don't want to spend time in any jail, but I'd rather spend time inside the workhouse than freeze to death outside. Was there any discussion on using this facility for emergency shelter?
So I will also have Whitney jump in on this person answering, but there are also other buildings that the city owns that are not currently contaminated with things like lead and asbestos that do not require a long length of time for people to be exposed to them for the effects of them to be permanent. And so in at least my opinion, if we are thinking about housing people short time because of the bitter cold, that I would ask that the city consider other buildings that are owned.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Please proceed. Please proceed.
Oh, I was just going to quickly say concerns about having resources for unhoused folks was very much a large part of our conversation. And I just want to highlight and underline what Melissa said, given the overlapping and compounding impacts that that spending time in certainly in the building and on a site that could add to folks' situation and negative situation. That is why the steering committee spent a lot of time thinking about what would be the conditions that would help move people out of those negative situations. And so that's why they spent a lot of time thinking about what would an offsite resource hub look like and where could that be located in a place where folks could more easily access jobs, food, and other resources, none of which is easily accessible on the site, in addition to the other potential environmental negative factors.
And was there any discussion or research into what it may take to remediate some of the negative environmental factors that you've laid out?
So
we had.
Go ahead, Sophia.
We had asked for those studies. We did not end up seeing any from the city during our time. The only report we received was for the building itself, which is why we keep mentioning asbestos and lead within the actual building. As far as remediating the site, I would leave that to more recent reports that I believe the city now has. However, I think really I think I mentioned several times, like, resources for community stability work best when they're actually in neighborhoods. And even if you were to remediate the site, that doesn't turn the location where it's at into a pedestrian-friendly, beautiful neighborhood that actually resources people. So in terms of remediation, I think you would have to imagine really transforming the entire area, which is not a scope that we were really considering.
I also want to underline that there apparently have been studies and reports that have emerged from the site. We were not provided that information while we were in the process of doing this process.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. At this point, I know that the administration has some folks present who want to.
Alderman Narayan, I apologize, but because we were not anticipating when we showed up today that we were going to be getting cut short, we understand Alderwoman Sonier's bill is very important and we're broadly in support of that. But if we could please prioritize, the city is always available to stand in the
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
some of the unhoused people.
I'm sorry. What we're going to do. So what we're going to do is what I laid out at the beginning of the meeting. We're going to hear from the speakers, and then we're going to take up public comment. Thank you. So now if we could move to the administration. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You could please state your name for the record.
Sure. Adam Pearson, Director of the Department of Human Services.
All right. And do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right. Please proceed.
Okay. Given the previous comment, I want to make sure to keep my remarks brief, also with an eye on the time. My name is Dr. Adam Pearson, the Director of the Department of Human Services. And I'm here today to speak to the potential benefits of using the campus of the NSI site for tiny homes. First, I want to thank the mayor and her team for putting in motion the steering committee to explore the uses of the space for this site. Secondly, I want to thank the members of the steering committee, for their work in gathering feedback and recommendations. I wanted to focus on 3 particular points today. Number 1, housing as a place of healing. Number 2, the practical nature of the site. Number 3, the need for land on which to expand housing in the region. So for the first point, the steering committee very rightly pointed out in its report that real and actual harm was done at the workhouse. I have been very vocal about this for a long time, and I stand in full agreement with that point. What happened in that building was a source of trauma for many, and some people who were released are still healing from their experiences. I also know that the building is not currently in use. And if rehabbed effectively, re-envisioned imaginatively, the land itself could become a place of healing and community. A village isn't just the physical structures on a piece of land. A community is not about only brick and mortar. It is about the people who can come together to work on shared goals in a location that will be newly designed for engagement, participation, and activities that can build meaning. What started out as a site that did not work for its intended purposes does not have to ultimately end up that way. Number 2, secondly, the primary vision for the use of the site as far as housing is concerned wouldn't be inside the existing structures. There's a large, spacious commercial kitchen, access to laundry facilities, and recreation spaces. Spaces of this size and scope are not currently built into existing leased land at Jefferson Spaces. Tenants and programs can make use of these spaces for life skills training, vocational training programs, and other uses. The land is spacious enough for gardens and outdoor recreation spaces. One of the recommendations from the steering committee was that there could be space utilized to shelter animals and a simultaneous use of that space for temporarily unhoused individuals and their pets. I love that recommendation. I was present at the Women's Safe House a few months ago as they cut the ribbon for their new kennel. I told the CEO and some of the staff that I would very much like to see more housing amenable for people with pets. Obviously, long-term and permanent supportive housing is the goal, but in the absence of capacity right now, I think that that recommendation from the steering committee could be congruent with using some of the space for tenants. Lastly, it is no surprise that the community needs more housing, term housing program. This past winter was my first in this role, and I received a lot of feedback from community members, providers, unhoused individuals, outreach teams, and elected officials that we need to build the capacity for more housing in the region. And I agree fully. And that takes a lot of shapes and sizes, whether it's more investment in diversion programs or rapid rehousing, whether it's ongoing relationship building with development and landlords, identifying land that could be used for shelter, housing, or tiny homes or other uses. We need to do our due diligence in identifying opportunities, and I believe this is an opportunity. As the point in time count of 2023 indicates, we have over 1,200 individuals who experience homelessness at the time of the count, just 100 being unsheltered. Last year, providers across the COC served over 2,700 individuals in our system. Admirable work. For the individuals who cycled through our emergency shelter programs, the average length of stay was 272 days. Not 10 days, not 30, not 60, but 272. Long-term housing programs that assist people with life skills can be beneficial. And if paired with a development that provides wraparound services, we can lead more people to their own housing in the community, thus decreasing emergency shelter length and free those beds up for more people who need help. This space would have many uses, housing being just one of them. If we have the opportunity to rehab it, re-envision it, and use it for good, I think that we should make use of the opportunity to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the speaker? All right, is there anyone? Alderman Sonia.
Hi, Dr. Pearson. Nice to see you. I had a timeline question. Do you know the timeline between the commission starting and then beginning their work and the timeline of the administration discussing using teeny homes to go on a site? Do you have an idea of what that was, or if there was any communication along the way, like if the commission knew that there was an idea to do this before they started, or if that was shared with them as they were working?
I don't know what the commission knew or what was shared with them. I know my office started to become part of the conversation about a month ago.
Okay. I guess you couldn't really speak to if there might be like some discrepancies there, because I think that might be where some of the community frustration might be coming at, as far as like, you know, if we were being transparent with them and letting them know what we were thinking while they were working on it. My other question is, do you have any concerns about the site's feasibility or habitability, or any ideas of what testing you might recommend to make sure that that is an option that won't be harmful to folks?
Yeah, so I know my department is primarily concerned with the housing and shelter aspect of it. I think there might be some from the city who can speak more on reports that may have been produced. I think there are mitigations that could be put into place to find solutions for some of the concerns that were mentioned in the steering committee report. We're short on time right now, but I do know that there could be plans put in place to mitigate a lot of those issues.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Aldridge.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I wish we definitely did have more time. I know a lot of people traveled and everything. I know there's also an important bill coming up, but folks organized a week for this. I'll just keep it quick. I do believe in tiny homes. Dr. Pearson, you do an amazing job when it comes to our unhoused. I give you credit. I think tiny homes are essential. I just want to echo and say that, you know, we have a lot of land. We have a lot of lots, and there is lots where there are not necessarily in residential areas. I do think after hearing this report, my concern is putting these tiny homes. One, it's like we pushing our unhoused away from people. Let's move that problem somewhere else, right? In the 14th ward, I probably have the most unhoused from Gateway 180 to the Biddle House. You know, they're all downtown, and I know there's a frustration that people deal with of we need to figure out a long-term solution. And I think tiny homes is a great idea, but moving them away from community when they are our communities, our aunties, our uncles, putting them in hazardous areas where we know that, I mean, over there is industrial pick and pulls, all these type of things. I don't just think this location is necessarily the right location, but I'm a big believer in tiny homes because they are in my ward off of Jefferson and Delmore, that is centralized, on a bus stop that is centralized in the community. I think that is the way that we need to be going about it. Just like the tiny homes that are in Alderwoman Keys were the veteran homes, it is centralized in the community. So it can be done, and I think this route, putting them industrial, is just the wrong approach.
Do you need for me to respond to that, or did I?
No, sir, just comment.
All right, is there anything further from the administration before we move to public comment?
I defer to any of my colleagues over here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Could you please state your name for the record?
And swear it in.
Could you please state your name for the record?
It's Thomas Mangonia.
All right, and do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right, please proceed.
My name is Thomas Mangonia. I'm the CEO of Magdala House. We operate the Tiny Homes Project along with a couple of other homeless programs, I think referred to Biddle House and Sisters Mission. We've operated the Tiny Homes Project since it opened in February of 21. And at that time, we had 50 tiny homes. This past year, based on the success we've had in placing people into permanent housing, the administration decided to add an additional 50 tiny homes, and I think that was in last July that was completed. But for most of that period of time, 2.5 years, we were operating with 50 tiny homes, and during that time, we have placed in permanent housing 250 people. And we address the issues that people have that are homeless. Most people that are homeless are not homeless just because of economic issues. They're homeless because they have other personal issues such as mental health, substance abuse, and actually 2/3 of the people we service have mental health problems. So part of our job is to assist them in overcoming those difficulties as well as their substance abuse, train them in life skills, and prepare them to live independently on their own. And we've been very pleased that we've been able to have the kind of success that we've had. I have the director of the homeless program with me, and if you wouldn't mind, I would like to have him up here because he could directly speak to some of his own experiences. Would that be acceptable?
Sure.
Garfield. This gentleman is Garfield Duckett. He is the...
Can we have some order, please?
Mr. Duckett operates, he is the director of all of our homeless programs, including the Tiny Homes Project, and his office is actually located at that location. But I'd like him to speak to some of the experiences he's had in being able to place people into permanent housing. This has been a very successful program. Garfield, come up to the microphone.
All right, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right, please proceed.
Yes, good afternoon, Board Chair, committee members, and those in the community. Thank you for this opportunity.
Could you state your name for me again?
Yes, my name is Garfield Duckett. Yes. And just wanted to share about the benefits that has been awarded to us and provided in terms of helping the community address homelessness. Now, of course, it's not the end all or the complete solution, but it definitely has benefited this community in terms of helping those individuals secure income and seek that they achieve permanent housing. It has truly been, in the 3 years that we've actually operated, this has been rewarding yet fulfilling, and we just hope that that is considered to be an element to, again, address homelessness in our community.
Any questions for the speaker? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to invite the committee, individually or collectively, to come visit tiny homes. It's an experience you ought to have. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Is there anyone further from the administration that needs? needs to come up before we move to public comment?
Good afternoon. I need a
All right. Yes, if you could please state your names for the record.
Kevin Trapp.
And,
Joanne Reno.
all right. And do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. I am with the City of St. Louis Board of Public Service. I'm here to discuss the environmental concerns on the site. We were tasked with determining if the soil and air sampling is fine, so we hired a local firm that is specialized in this, Professional Environmental Engineers, who is Joanne with me here. They took samples of the air and the soil. With that, I'll just pass it.
Yes, we sampled the surface soil because that's what would most be come in contact if there were any tiny homes put there. And then we also did sample some subsurface down to about 10 feet. The surface samples that we collected in the area in which the tiny homes are proposed, there are some elevated levels above a residential risk-based target level. Those levels are set by Missouri Department of Natural Resources, and they take into consideration all age ranges for residents, from children all the way up to the elderly. Missouri, however, does not have background concentrations of certain constituents. Levels that were over risk-based target levels there was one contaminant above risk-based target levels. However, if you would look at background levels, if there were background levels in the St. Louis metropolitan area, the concentrations would be less than. Even in Illinois, yes, we're in Missouri, but Illinois right across the river and metropolitan areas do have published background levels, and the concentrations in the proposed area would be less than those. So surface samples, even though background levels would be greater than what we found here, we did propose to cap those areas either with some clean fill or a gravel cover. And then that would take away from the receptors, the residents coming in contact with that soil.
The committee doesn't work with the general public asking people questions. We're all here to represent our people. Alderwoman Saunier, you have a question for the speakers?
Yes, thank you for being here. When were you guys commissioned?
We performed the work at the very beginning of November.
Of last year?
Yes.
And the information that you're talking about, is that publicly accessible somewhere, or has it been shared with anybody in the public?
That would be.
BPS received the report in December of last year, 2023, and we are not the ones to disseminate the information, so we pass it on.
Do you know if it's okay for that to be shared with the committee?
I believe you all have it. I was told you all have it.
Oh, I don't think so. I haven't seen it, and I've gotten questions about it, but that may not be for you all. That would just be my request. I know folks from admin are here, so I think it might be good for that to be shared with the committee, and maybe we can talk about how to make that publicly available. Thank you.
Really quickly, just so I heard it right, you said you guys would put stuff over the land like gravel, and you had said some towards the end. Could you?
A few inches of soil or rock.
So you wouldn't
Please speak into the mic for me, sir.
Speaking to, they were saying
a few inches of soil or rock just to cover the area. It does not need to be replaced. It doesn't need to be treated, just capped.
So if it doesn't need to be removed and replaced, what is the point to just recovering it? Because if it seems like you would want
it would take away any resident's pathway into coming in contact with that material.
Okay.
Does anyone have any further questions? All right. Thank you all so much for your testimony. At this point, we are at 3:30. I know Alderwoman Saunier has her bill to be heard. I did not schedule that meeting. This is the time that the Public Safety Committee should be continuing on. I share the frustration that we're going to recess this meeting. I will note that the report with the environmentals is on the city website, so you can find that report there. And at this point, we are going to adjourn until next Thursday at 2 p.m., where we will pick this discussion back up.
Can we get a meeting that doesn't have other board bills on the agenda?
At this point, no. You will be discussion item number on the agenda for next Thursday, and we're going to pick it up there. Thank you so much. And
So moved. Second.
all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Stand adjourned.